This is Lake Constance at dusk. I'd actually meant to open the previous episode with this. I was just surprised I got the whole thing in frame, as the lake is 63 kilometres long. But yeah, happened to get lucky with this shot more recently, as we've been recapping our journey beginning at Geneva in the extreme western end of Switzerland, crossing the entire country over into Germany, staying on the German side of the lake, particularly to lap up the Pile Dwelling Museum, a quick sneak into Austria and Lichtenstein the previous day. So, got up early the next morning to be by the lake at sunrise, which was incredibly peaceful. Uldingen is a small town that seems to be mostly boat people and over 50s, the occasional young family. I went back to rouse the boys, and together we took an early morning swim in the lake, which was quite the experience. It gratifyingly didn't have the biting chill of an English body of water, and swimming in the near endless blue with the Pile Dwelling Museum just off to our right looking good enough to eat, all very special stuff. The hotels along the front here are very nice, but little chance we could afford to stay there. Once again, was just so pleased we managed to score an Airbnb where we did, as options anywhere on the lake were kind of scant. Something I guess I found a little surprising: we're in the south of Germany. It's this exquisite combination of the mountains, the heat of being further south, and the cool of the water, and it's August. So I was worried we'd just be wading through crowds in the manner you might expect of like Keswick in the Lake District, or the other spots in Cumbria, which over the holidays pull thousands of people from across the country into these smallish towns that can barely provide all the cafes, toilets, bins and everything else. Maybe that happens to an extent here, but we never saw it. No crushes of people, no overflowing bins. In fact, the small towns seem to just be continuing as they always would. I don't know. I guess I thought we might have to fight for a spot here, but the only issue seemed to be mainly from the supply side, as there weren't the greatest number of places to stay to begin with. Anyway, we had other things to catch, so it was out of the Airbnb and 40 minutes in the car. This place was something I'd only found out about much more recently, and it's hard to convey just how special this place is. It's a reconstructed Carolingian monastic community out of wood. I'm not going to divert a big portion of the episode to explain the Franks or the early Middle Ages here, but while I've spent the last 6 to 7 years searching out ruined monasteries around the UK, before they were transformed into these huge Gothic edifices in stone, many would have begun as simple communities in quite basic wooden structures. And to be able to explore that, I honestly don't know where else you'd find a place like this. This is a time period about which we know less than we'd like, and it's precisely these early phases of sites that have the least to show. These buildings would scarcely leave a brown mark in the earth, just about discernible to archaeology, nigh impossible for the public to see anything tangible. And not least because these early communities were comparatively impoverished by design. Anyway, yes, really recommend this. Another nice touch, in much the same way as the monasteries would have invariably had breweries and all sorts of crafts and foodstuffs being made on site, you can enjoy food here from the cafe, which we did very much. We headed back towards Lake Constance. I felt, with everything we were doing, our actual time around the lake itself had been less than it ought. There are some historic towns we hadn't included on our itinerary, such as Lindau. We weren't going for a completionist run. However, without a need to rush anywhere for now, we could actually stop off for just a little bit in the town of Constance itself. This is right on the German-Swiss border, most of it on the German side. The town is certainly very charming. It was a sweltering day, so we weren't heading anywhere fast. Wandered to the cathedral. We took the couple of hundred steps to the top of the tower to get some gorgeous views over the town and the lake. Also stopped in this pretty good coffee place for an espresso on ice. Just very charming streets, a lot to love here. Something I can't stop thinking about. I'd mentioned the shock we got when it turned out that everything denominated in Swiss francs cost twice as much when converted from sterling, and this would be even more stark when converting from the euro. But, okay, so here's the border. It's Schengen, so there's no friction of a checkpoint or anything. However, well, nature abhors a vacuum and economics definitely does. So, apart from convenience, how does a grocery store stay in business on the Swiss side? Because for most of the town, if you could just walk maybe 10 minutes, your groceries in euros on the German side would be less than half what you'd pay. I mean, unless the Swiss stores have had to halve their prices to stay competitive, which I also kind of doubt. I don't know, why wouldn't just everyone in Kreuzlingen not take every opportunity to buy anything except maybe just the smallest things on the German side? I actually don't know the answer to this. Anyway, onwards over into Switzerland again. We had to make up some distance west, brief stop at this partially reconstructed Roman castrum. It was so hot at this point. As previously discussed, this seems to be an example of a Roman site that has been functionally rebuilt on the footprint of the archaeology. This masonry, I'm actually really not sure. It looks approximately like the same technique we use outside of car parks from like the 1960s, but I'm torn because on the info boards you can see walls being excavated, so there's definitely something there to excavate. It apparently had been quarried for stone extensively up till the work done in the 1800s. I don't know. According to the info boards, the fortress may have been in use all the way into the 1100s. So maybe there's some later layers here as well. It's been tidied off, but it's nice to see it with the extra height. It really brings it to life, and it's in a very beautiful setting. So our final destination for the day, and the roads around Zurich are absolute Satan. Like, any slight mistake in one of the many options to exit this huge gyratory, and there is no possibility to correct. You are slapped with a 14-minute penalty as you're forced to take this 4-kilometre tunnel all the way out of town, only to have to take it all the way back in again. A sort of naughty step timeout for anyone who makes any sort of wrong turning in this part of town. We eventually arrived a bit frazzled, and, stopped off at the hostel to take a breather and cool off. We were all pretty hungry, but we also didn't want to spend too much. So we ended up taking a 45-minute walk on a quest to find an affordable dinner, ending up at this place, which, actually these takeaway wraps were about 12 quid, a near miracle as far as this city is concerned. Yeah, they were pretty great. Now, I don't have much footage of what followed. It turns out, while heading north-south around this part of Zurich is fine, east-west, that's a bit tricky. You have to cross a wide river, a multi-lane highway, train lines, and all this to get towards the lake. So it took us the best part of an hour to get there, by which time it was dark. So we had this night swim in Lake Zurich, which I'm unable to show you adequately. You'll just have to believe me that it was incredible. I don't swim that often in any given year, let alone swimming at night. So to have the lights across the lake surface, the heat of the summer evening, and all with great friends, yeah, really incredible. Remember that being particularly special. And it was a very circuitous walk back to the hostel, but everyone was in high spirits. Well, next morning, needed a coffee first thing, so it was another 4 franc espresso. And sure enough, even with all the practice we'd had on the way in, the roads still did us dirty on the way out too. We eventually managed to extricate ourselves from Zurich. You feel like we've not really given it a fair blush. I am sure the historic centre is very pleasant, but it just wasn't a huge priority, bearing in mind we're covering an appreciable fraction of the northern half of Switzerland in, just about 4 days when all pushed together. Ancient or ancient-ish stuff is the priority. City centres, somewhat less so. And after a 90-minute drive to make up most of the distance back west, we arrived in a town actually a short distance from Avenches, where we'd previously been. And I feel this makes a much better use of time than Zurich centre. This is Merton. Oh, it's so pretty. It's as if it was built from scratch with the express purpose of being the perfect model of a Swiss medieval lakeside town. I'd actually assumed with a name like Merton that this would be a German-speaking part of Switzerland, but quickly discovered when ordering an espresso it was French or English, s'il vous plaît. The prices prevented us from particularly splashing out. I did finally visit a cash point to get Swiss francs out, something we'd avoided, as having euros left over at the end of the trip is actually something of a convenience for next time, whereas the Swiss franc, less than fungible really anywhere other than within the Swiss border. If anything, it was hotter than it had been all week, so we enjoyed the historic streets, did a loop of the walls, all incredibly beautiful, but couldn't linger for too long. With all those Swiss francs in hand, we had unfinished business. Unwilling to let a pile-dwelling museum go, well, this was actually more of a Neolithic village, but same context, finally made it to the site at Glettons. With cash-only entry, our first attempt to visit this on day 3, we just ended up going to the beach. But now, the village lacustre was just fantastic. This is now the 4th episode where our choices seem to be largely steered by filming recreated archaeology sites. I don't know what to tell you. It just always feels great to set foot in these, get a real feel for a Neolithic community in a way that pure archaeology is just not going to be able to do. Catching Neolithic sites around Europe has given us some of the most unique moments, whether it was catching the sunrise at 6 a.m. on Malta as the sun hit the altar on the spring equinox, as it had done 5,000 years ago, or catching the sun go down over Castlerig in the Lake District, or the surreal, desolate peace of this Neolithic temple structure on Shetland, or an October morning at the vast passage graves in Antequera in Andalusia, or 6 a.m. at the Ring of Brodgar with the space entirely to myself, or an afternoon catching passage graves in Denmark, or a boiling hot day on Cyprus catching the A ceramic settlements there, or the sunrise at the Ring Heilington Pomelta in Germany a couple of episodes back. There are still loads of places outstanding. I mean, there's a ton of dolmens to catch in Bulgaria. We still haven't made it to Çatalhöyük or Göbekli Tepe in Anatolia, which has completely transformed our understanding of the earliest parts of the Neolithic. We got a little further around Ireland just recently, but the whole island is practically sinking under the weight of all the standing stones, dolmens, court tombs, just so much more to catch. And it's the same story with all the Roman stuff we've been going after on all sides of the Mediterranean, or pursuing the Normans across every corner of England and down through France and into southern Italy, where there's a huge wealth of Norman sites. It's all stuff we're building towards these huge series. Except, for whatever reason, this platform has got us in a bit of a death loop, just steadfastly refusing to put our videos out to much more than about 200 people. Is it that we're just not doing the YouTube face in the thumbnails, or not pivoting to just King Arthur and Pyramids, King Arthur and Pyramids? Yeah, we are proudly, resolutely, and will always be AI free, but the slop channels will still be doing 8 figures regardless. Look, I don't know, we just really need the help. If you've been seeing these, please do say hi in the comments. Always appreciate when people do that. And thank you to all those who keep up with what we do on the reg. But yes, a subscribe and crucially hitting the bell can make all the difference. If people are actually getting notifications when we have stuff out, we may actually have a chance. Anyway, lots more to come. So, making up the final bit of distance west, it was definitely that stage where the car becomes a relief because of the aircon. We dropped into Lausanne. This is on the northern shore of Lake Geneva. I had some Roman ruins to see, like a little neglected. And again, I'm a little agnostic about what part of these are restorations and what's original. This does look a lot more like the sort of Roman masonry you'd find around Europe, so I think this might be more genuine. This is an ancient dock when the shoreline of the lake was a little higher up, and there's loads more here besides. There's a basilica, a Gallo-Roman temple, even the fragments of a small hypocaust in there. We did take a brief dip in Lake Geneva, very welcome on this hot day that had got very muggy with the high clouds just making everything a bit stuffy. And from there, we were almost done. I mentioned before that the city of Geneva felt like unfinished business. In December 2022, it had sped past the train window, but we'd not been left with any time to actually go in and see it. But I'll be honest, the city was not my favourite. Not even the older parts of town. It's not unpleasant. Obviously, busy, lots going on. But while getting a few street shots in the historic quarter and then look at the cathedral, maybe it was just the heat, I was just struggling to get that enthusiastic. From all the amazing things we'd seen this trip, yeah, it's something you see over and over in Europe, but you can see plain as day just from the rooftops and the street layout. So look, here's the old town of Geneva, and then zoom out, that's the modern city. It's such a mad change of scale. So from there, it was back to the airport and home time with a rather beautiful sundown to send us off. Speaking of which, we'll get to the ending game soon, but feels like we should have some final thoughts. I don't know of many English speakers who would think of Switzerland as a summer trip location, but there are so many flights here. Geneva appears to be an EasyJet hub, so there's like 4 to 5 flights there a day. Never for that much. I said as much in the opening of the first episode, but for a country that is most synonymous with snow-capped mountains, it was perhaps surreal to spend 5 days in scorching heat, saw a not inconsiderable number of lizards, or geckos, or whatever these are, dragonflies, and all sorts of wildlife you'd equate with hotter Mediterranean climates. It was a lush trip, plunging periodically into the cool but still temperate waters of the Swiss lakes, exploring ancient dwellings, gazing at a frankly baffling number of amphitheatres. I'd promised the boys a new lake every day, and much as we didn't quite stick to this, just getting the chance to dip in Neuchâtel, Konstanz, Zurich and Geneva, just, lovely stuff. And you can't help but be impressed with how clean and well maintained everything is. I know that sounds like a stereotype, but it's true, even just in the small things, In the UK, we're accustomed to pavements looking like this, kind of a messy mix of work done at various times. You never see that in Switzerland. The infrastructure is never anything less than top tier, even in quite remote spots out in the countryside. Geneva, a few hours before our flight, was the first time we saw homelessness, or really any visible type of poverty, the whole trip. Now, you could frame that in different ways. I don't know how the social programs look in Switzerland, so has it genuinely been solved, or is it just swept out of sight. Since the latter rarely works, and we'd traverse the length of the country, and yeah, it does point towards them taking care of their citizens in a way that seems unimaginable in 21st century England. However, and we've made no secret that truthfully, we quickly came to really resent the Swiss franc. And look, I hope that the Swiss are taking home maybe 2,000 to 3,000 francs a month in an average paycheck, such that 5 francs for an espresso is totally affordable. But knowing the exchange rate, it's like, ow! What did I do to you? But yeah, the sheer amount of ancient stuff that the country rewarded us with, it's an absolute rush. And alongside that, getting to southern Germany and seeing the Pile Dwelling Museum, that was goals. And yeah, nice to scratch off some more European countries while we're at it. Next time, we've got another incredible mountainous country to visit as we're crisscrossing Albania and much more besides. But, okay, the closing game. I've been going back through my footage to find more of these, but it's a hard thing to balance. I mean, it's exciting when you actually can figure out what you're seeing from the aircraft. It's just amazing how many miles you can catch in a single view. It's something you never experience from the ground, but it hinges on quite a few things. First of all, of course, not being dark, that rules out half of our flights. Clear conditions, that's another load ruled out. And it has to at least be vaguely possible. I mean, I have lots of very nice high angles of the Alps, but, if you're looking to try and identify this exact grid reference among the near identical looking mountains, yeah, it's just not happening. So, back in April, we were flying back into the UK, and while I couldn't keep track of everything I was seeing, it's quite something to see the unmistakable scar on the landscape left by HS2. It's also visible from satellite views now, pretty much visible from space. Anyway, this is coming to England from east to west, if that helps. So first of all, this UK city. The island there might give you a bit of a clue. Next along, this would be almost impossible, except, hint, there's a major Saxon church down there. I had a suspicion when I was flying over it. I took a shot, and when I checked it, I was like, yes, nailed it. Then there's this hill fort, so this is a little further west of those first two. And finally, this Roman oppidum. So yeah, see if you can get those 4. Some slightly UK-based archaeology nerd stuff there, some easier than others. I get no chance I'd be able to identify these if I wasn't immersed in this stuff pretty much all the time. And if you've been enjoying the music in the background, it's ours. We make all the music for these episodes, and you can catch it on bandcamp.com. If you want to support the channel, that's the place to do it. Also, as I mentioned, we're working through a backlog. We're currently going through some of the stuff we did in the summer of 2024. But if you want to see what we're doing on more of a week-by-week basis, follow us on Blue Sky. And yeah, please do give us a like and a subscribe. And to be honest, if you're not hitting the bell to get notifications, there's a good chance you'll just never hear from us again as the platform buries what we're doing. So that would be a massive help, and thank you. And we'll catch you very soon.